Upon discovering that I was ineligible to inherit my father's estate, my husband, Jackson, shouted, "What? You can't inherit the property? You're of no value to me now." I wanted a divorce immediately. Subsequently, I executed my plan for retribution against both my swiftly remarried husband and my sister. My name is Shelley, and I am a 35-year-old office worker who has been in a marriage with Jackson for 2 years. Our introduction was facilitated by a family member, leading to our union. Coming from a notably affluent family background and being one of the 2 daughters, our kin were concerned about ensuring proper succession, hence they endorsed Jackson as a suitable match for marriage. Despite Jackson not formally being adopted as a son-in-law, he began residing with us at my parental home. Following the passing of my mother a few years back, my father, my husband, and I have shared our ancestral residence. Jackson appeared genuinely affectionate and respectful towards my father. However, the relative who had made our introduction issued a caution about him just before we got married, hinting at his potential greed for wealth. Despite the upcoming nuptials and completion of our engagement rituals, I detected no overt signs of greed in him, leading us to proceed with the marriage. Post-marriage, I remained vigilant due to the relative's advisory, yet Jackson showed no overt fascination with wealth. Nevertheless, he occasionally exhibited curiosity about my father's financial status, particularly during casual conversations over drinks, which did not particularly alarm me as my father was quite open. Another point of interest for Jackson was my sister, Ashley, who is 5 years younger and notably more vibrant and socially active compared to my reserved nature. Unlike me, Ashley boasts a more distinct appearance and lifestyle, which noticeably surprised and intrigued Jackson upon their first meeting. Despite these dynamics, I initially believed there was no urgency for concern since Ashley, with her attractive attributes, could continue the family lineage. However, I gradually understood the underlying apprehensions of our relatives. My father has been overly indulgent with Ashley, encouraging her academic and vocational pursuits post-high school without clear ambitions, contrasting starkly with my mother's more disciplined approach. Despite my mother's insistence on employment post-college, my father supported Ashley's further education. Subsequent to vocational training, Ashley secured employment at a business owned by a friend of my father, but resigned 6 months later, providing a justification that left me astounded. When she resigned from her job, she claimed, "I can't fully utilize my talents at this company." My sister, who had not even completed half a year of work, behaved as though she had mastered all aspects of her job, leaving my mother and me utterly astonished. Yet, my father, seemingly convinced by her, quickly secured her another position. Shortly after she began her new role, my mother became ill and was hospitalized. During this time, my sister claimed she was taking time off work to care for our ailing mother. However, her version of caring seemed to consist only of sitting in the hospital room, chatting with our mother, or being engrossed in her smartphone in the waiting area. Consequently, I found myself handling all the practical tasks, like fetching and replacing our mother's laundry during her hospital stay, as my sister provided no assistance whatsoever. Despite this, my mother probably appreciated having someone to talk to, but her health declined significantly within a month, to the point where she could no longer engage in conversation. 2 weeks following the deterioration of her condition, our mother passed away. The sudden loss deeply affected my father and sister. They were so distraught that they couldn't even manage the funeral arrangements, leaving the responsibility entirely to me. Thankfully, with the support of our relatives, we managed to give our mother a proper send-off. Following our mother's death, my sister began working part-time and moved out to live independently. However, her earnings were insufficient to cover her living expenses, so our father stepped in to pay her rent and utility bills. It appeared she spent what she earned on leisure activities. Whenever her part-time income fell short, she would request additional funds from our father. While our mother was stringent with finances and never provided an allowance once my sister began working, our father became more lenient after my mother's death, fulfilling my sister's monetary requests. I believed there was no issue with this arrangement as long as my father and sister were content. Even after marrying and moving in with my husband, my father continued to provide my sister with financial support. Unbeknownst to me, she was also soliciting money from my husband, who complied willingly, urging her to keep it a secret from me, fearing it might incite jealousy. My sister chose to work only when it suited her, relying on the financial support from our father and my husband. This carefree lifestyle, however, was short-lived as our father eventually fell ill and required hospitalization. While I attended to our father during my work breaks, my sister was conspicuously absent from the hospital. Instead, she began contacting me, insistently demanding money, claiming, "I've been receiving money from Dad every month, so you need to continue giving it to me. After all, the rent and utilities are deducted from Dad's account." Her confrontational tone took me by surprise, as this was the first time I was made aware of her demands. I became infuriated with my sister, who was preoccupied with her personal life rather than our father's hospitalization. I was tempted to end the call, yet she appeared to be in distress, prompting me to inquire, "How much has Dad been giving you each month? Hurry up and find employment so you can be self-sufficient." My sister responded grumpily, "You're so irritating. I've been receiving $1,000 a month, not including rent and utilities, by the way." I was shocked by her brazen attitude about the financial support she was getting. It seemed to me that our father's generosity was disincentivizing her from pursuing serious employment. Initially, I didn't see a significant issue with her receiving financial help, trusting that our father would soon be well. However, his condition deteriorated unexpectedly, and I found myself barely keeping our relatives informed. The doctor's news of his critical state left me profoundly distressed. During such times, I yearned for my husband's support, but his visits to the hospital were scarce, citing busyness at work. When he did appear, he inappropriately probed about my father's estate, asking, "Your father's inheritance must be substantial, right? Since you and your sister are the sole heirs, will it be divided equally between you?" I was at a loss for words, facing the harsh reality of my husband's fixation on monetary matters, a concern previously voiced by our relatives. When I informed my sister of our father's critical condition over the phone, she showed concern only for her financial situation, insisting, "Make sure you continue the monthly allowance. I can't manage without it." The conversation ended abruptly, leaving me both angered by her reaction and troubled by a familiar male voice in the background, which gave me an ominous feeling. About a month later, my father passed away, and disappointingly, neither my sister nor my husband were present during his final moments. Having organized my mother's funeral previously, I understood the emotional toll involved. Yet, I received no assistance from them. My sister didn't even attend the service. Although my husband made a brief appearance at the funeral, he quickly left, claiming he had to return to work. The family member who had introduced us questioned his absence, remarking, "Isn't it odd for the chief mourner to be missing?" I could only muster a forced smile and explain, "He's caught up with work, so he had to leave." The relatives sighed in response, leaving me feeling abandoned and validated in their skepticism. After the funeral, as I was catching my breath, my husband, wearing a grin, inquired about the inheritance. "So, how much did you inherit? Even if split, it must be a substantial amount, right?" His questions confirmed the relatives' warnings about his greed. I was disheartened to witness the true nature of my husband, who seemed solely interested in my father's wealth. I gave him an evasive answer. "My sister gets $1 billion and I get zero. We haven't talked to the lawyer yet, and I haven't had time to process my feelings since the funeral just ended." Seeing my husband happily talking about the inheritance, I felt laughter out of anger. Believing my words, my husband yelled, "What? You can't inherit any property? I don't need you anymore. Let's divorce right now." I felt the same way, so I retorted, "Let's do that. You only married me for your father's inheritance in the first place. I'll divorce you." With that, I shoved the prepared divorce papers in front of my husband. As if anticipating this, I took out the divorce papers, which seemed to surprise him a bit, but he signed them anyway. After signing the divorce papers, my husband left the house, saying, "I'll divorce you, who gets zero inheritance, and marry your sister to get the $1 billion." I didn't care and immediately went to the city hall to submit the divorce papers. I was able to leave my terrible husband. My ex-husband submitted his marriage registration with my sister the very next day. A few days later, my ex-husband called me. Still believing that story, he yelled, "When are you going to start the inheritance procedures? Give Ashley her $1 billion already." I had been waiting for my ex-husband to contact me. I didn't want to reach out to him after he left our house. I replied to my ex-husband in a business-like tone, "Let's have a discussion at my place this Sunday. I'm preparing for the procedure and waiting for you." Jackson, my ex-husband, was thrilled at the thought of receiving an inheritance and hung up the phone. But I was looking forward to seeing his face when he found out the truth. Over the weekend, my ex-husband and my sister Ashley came to our parents' house, and both of them were surprised that I had called a lawyer. However, Jackson seemed to convince himself and said, "I guess we need a lawyer when we're inheriting a large amount of money." Then the lawyer, with a puzzled look, started talking to Jackson. "There is a matter of inheritance, but before that, there is a matter of a claim for compensation from Shelley, your ex-wife, towards you, Jackson." He showed Jackson several photos. In those photos, Jackson was coming out of Ashley's house, and the date was clearly written. The lawyer continued talking to Jackson, "Since these are photos proving infidelity before the divorce, you have to pay compensation." When I heard Jackson talking about the inheritance over the phone with Ashley, I immediately asked the lawyer to investigate Jackson's infidelity. Maybe he thought I was too busy with my father's funeral, but Jackson and Ashley met at Ashley's house almost every day, and thanks to that, I was able to get many evidence photos. The conversation about inheritance turned into a conversation about compensation, and both Ashley and Jackson were speechless. But Jackson quickly recovered and retorted, "Compared to the $100 million inheritance, compensation is just a small amount. I'll pay it right away." When the lawyer handed him the compensation claim documents, he signed them easily. After confirming that, I told Jackson, "I'll make sure you pay the compensation since you've signed it. But be happy with Ashley, who has zero inheritance." The moment Ashley heard zero inheritance, she screamed, "What do you mean my inheritance is zero? I'm supposed to have $100 million. Jackson's face turned red, and he angrily said, "There's no way there's zero inheritance. I won't let you take it all for yourself." The lawyer calmly began explaining to the angry pair, "Ashley, you're the daughter of your late mother from a previous marriage. Since you have not been legally adopted by your late father, there is no legal parent-child relationship. Therefore, Ashley cannot inherit your father's estate." I also told Ashley, who seemed to be confused, "I don't think you remember because you were only 1 year old when our parents got remarried, but I remember it clearly. I was 6 years old when our parents remarried, and I remember being happy that I suddenly had a sister. I never thought that such a sister would steal my husband." Both our parents were struggling with young children and had someone mediate between them, thinking it would be best for them to remarry. My mother treated me like her real daughter, and my father treated Ashley with care. My father might have spoiled Ashley because she was not his real daughter, and he wanted to be extra careful with her. Our parents each had a child when they remarried, and my mother, who was suspected by relatives of marrying my wealthy father for his money, refused to have Ashley legally adopted by him. The reason the relatives kept recommending marriage proposals to me was that they knew I was the only one who could inherit my father's estate. If our parents had had a child together, things might have gotten even more complicated. But fortunately, or unfortunately, they didn't have any children. They might have decided not to have children to avoid future inheritance disputes. It has now become clear that our father continued to support my sister financially after she became an adult because he couldn't pass on his inheritance to her. I am not legally related to my mother because we did not go through adoption, but it never bothered me in daily life. It seemed our parents never told my sister that they were both remarried, and she found out the truth for the first time that day. My ex-husband's face changed from red to pale as soon as he realized the situation. He signed the documents and was even asked to pay for damages when he couldn't get the inheritance he had been expecting from my sister. With a blue face, my ex-husband said to me, "Was what you said about my sister getting $10 billion and me getting nothing a lie?" Holding back laughter, I said, of course, it was a lie. It was to get back at you for cheating on me behind my back. Besides, there's no way Dad's inheritance was worth $10 million. Even our wealthy father didn't have an inheritance of $10 million. Until that moment, my sister had been quiet, but she suddenly let out a scream. I've spent so much, expecting Dad's inheritance. What about the funds he used to provide? Will you cover those expenses for me, big sister? I responded to my anxious sister, you have a dependable husband now. You no longer need that support, right? Let Jackson take care of you. My sister glanced at my ashen-faced ex-husband, but he just shook his head. I've also made several purchases, counting on the inheritance, so I can't afford to support you. Besides, I'm struggling with my own finances as I have to settle the damages, he said. Then, my ex-husband unexpectedly fell to his knees before me, begging for forgiveness. Shelley, I'm sorry. It was all my fault. Can you forgive me and take me back? The lawyer, witnessing the scene, chuckled as he packed up, his earlier haughtiness replaced by a ridiculous sight of him kneeling. After the meeting, my ex-husband and sister left dejectedly and eventually divorced. My ex-husband, who had married again with the aim of securing my sister's supposed fortune, lost interest in her when she ended up with nothing. He explained that he couldn't support my sister as he had to compensate me. Since he owned no assets, we agreed he would pay the damages in monthly installments, as suggested by the lawyer, ensuring I wouldn't lose out. With no support from our father, my sister began working part-time, but she couldn't manage her debts and ultimately declared bankruptcy. She had to leave her apartment and disappeared without a trace. Our father's well-intended support had unfortunately led her to a point where she couldn't seriously commit to work. Concurrently, a family member tried to match me with a new romantic prospect as I returned to live in my childhood house by myself. Nevertheless, given my past experiences, I rejected the offer. I was not eager to encounter someone similar to my former spouse. On this occasion, I resolved to find an appropriate partner independently.